Our special guest on RunTheTriangle.com is premier sports writer Eric Pincus. He's with the Los Angeles Times, where you can find round-the-clock purple and gold news with his Lakers Now blog. And he's also senior writer at BasketballInsiders.com. Thank you for joining me, Eric.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
So why did LeBron choose the Cavs over the Lakers? Why didn't the Lakers land any big-name free agents? Was Carmelo ever really in play?
Well, I mean, LeBron wanted to go back to Cleveland, and that's where he wanted to go. And so I don't think he really truly considered seriously any other option other than returning to Miami, which I think was, if anything, his second choice, but probably a distant second. So if the guy wants to go home, that has nothing to do with the Lakers. That's just where he wants to be for a lot of reasons. And when you look at Carmelo, he had a great meeting with the Lakers. He left it very positively. But ultimately, Lakers aren't really ready to compete on a high level. The Knicks maybe aren't either, but they have more money to offer. And even though the money may not have, you could argue that maybe the money wasn't that much different, it definitely was more money. And so he stuck around in New York. And I don't think he wanted to move his family, his kids in school and having to relocate. I think he's happy enough in New York and has enough faith in Phil Jackson that it was the right move for him. And yeah, the Lakers, they had a lot to offer, but realistically, there's not enough talent there just yet. And players like to go where there's going to be a winning situation, and Lakers just aren't quite there yet.
As far as retaining their own big-name free agent, why were they unable to retain Pau Gasol?
Well, I mean, Pau wanted to win, and so you go to the same notion that, I mean, he would have stuck around if the Lakers had added on pieces that meant winning, like Melo or LeBron or someone else that really would have moved the needle. That wasn't the case, and so he's not going to stick around on a team that are trying to trade him multiple times and come and play for a team that's not really going to win. He wants to finish up. He still has a handful of years left. We don't know how many, but he wants to spend those years winning and not going through what he went through the last couple of years with the Lakers. So he had a great experience in Los Angeles for the most part, had some difficult times. I think while there was some hurt there, that could have been resolved had the Lakers there was enough motivation for him to resolve them. But realistically, Lakers are a slow-moving product right now. They're gonna improve, but it's unclear how quickly they're going to improve. And Pau didn't want to be there to try to find out. He'd rather go to a situation like Chicago, where they immediately jump to essentially the best or top 2 or 3 teams in the East. And that's a pretty significant leap, as opposed to being maybe in the 8 to 12 range in the West. I mean, 8 is arguably best case, at least from Pau's perspective. Why go that way when the West is so competitive and the East is not nearly as difficult to get through, and you're on a team that may be a top team versus Lakers, who are clearly rebuilding.
And can you quickly summarize the coaching situation? Why did it take so long to get hometown Inglewood hero Byron Scott in as head coach?
Well, he was under contract with the Cavs through the end of June, so there was really no reason to hire him until after the draft, and a lot of coaches were hired in that stretch between the end of the season in April to the draft and the beginning of June. Well, the Lakers weren't going to hire a guy who was still being paid by another team. What's the point? And so they did their research. They interviewed Byron. They were pretty clear that was who they wanted. They talked to other candidates and kept their options open. But once we got to July, when he was no longer under contract with the Cavs, well, the Lakers had a lot of free agency to deal with, so they went and made all their moves, their pitch to Melo, to LeBron, to Pau. They went through the steps to get Carlos Boozer, Jeremy Lin, and the different players that they acquired over the summer. They had summer league. They did all the various things that teams do, and so once they settled down and got past that initial rush of free agency, and then they sat down and they said, all right, let's get Byron signed up. So for the fan or the pundit or the critic, the Lakers, they didn't know what they wanted to do. They knew what they wanted to do. They just didn't want to hire a coach that was being paid by another team until he was free of that contract. So that's really what was going on behind the scenes. It's just a little bit of patience is all required. And realistically, did it matter that they didn't have a coach? I mean, it's the front office that puts together the team. They're going to put it together how they believe they should put it together. And the coaches, some coaches have more input. The Lakers aren't a team like that. They're going to put the team together how they want to put it together. And maybe if Phil Jackson was coach, they put it together differently. But really, it's up to the head office, it's up to Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak. And so they put together the best team that they thought possible. I don't think it was really a priority at that point to get a coach.
A lot of basketball observers around the globe want to know what's the temperature of Kobe Bryant, his health, and his outlook of what's going on with the Lakers organization right now.
Well, I mean, Kobe's supposedly in great shape and ready to go and healthy. His Achilles is stronger than it ever was because technically once you have that surgery, that's what happens. It's actually rebuilt. And so his other Achilles is actually not as strong as his rebuilt Achilles. As far as the knee, he could have returned late last season. It just was at a point where the Lakers were terrible, and it was better to just sit him out. There was no reason to bring him back at that point. So he sat out the rest of the season. And what will Kobe be is the big question, because just because he's healthy now, I mean, Steve Nash is healthy now. It doesn't mean anything. You have to see how is that player going to react to playing 82 games, 3 games in 5 nights, 4 games in 6 nights, or whatever the schedule might bring up. And Kobe's still 36-ish. That's old as far as basketball terms. But equally, 2 years ago he was amazing. I mean, that was one of his best seasons of his entire career before he blew out his Achilles. And so maybe he's at that level. Maybe he's a little bit different. We'll have to wait and see. But I think Kobe's going to surprise a lot of people, and he's going to have a very strong season. Obviously, the Lakers didn't make massive moves to improve, but there's limitations. Some of those limitations are set because they are paying Kobe Bryant so much money, about 25-ish, $28-ish million this year. So, they're limited in what they could have done, and Kobe's going to have to be patient, but at the same time, he's going to have to drive this team and try to find a way to win with what he's got. And we'll see what comes this season. It doesn't look on paper like it's a lot, but, Kobe's one of those guys who kind of defies the odds.
And finally, Eric Pincus, give us 3 things, a trifecta. Give us 3 things that would be most important for the Lakers to make the playoffs this season in the West.
Well, I mean, after last year, the obvious answer is health. They had more injuries last year than any team in the league, and so it doesn't matter how good your roster is. If the roster is not wearing a uniform, you're not going to win games. So if they can stay healthy, that's huge. The next question is, of course, Kobe Bryant, and is he Kobe Bryant, and can he elevate his game to what he used to be, and then also elevate his teammates' game so that they can become something more than what they are on paper, because there's a lot right about the roster. It just comparatively doesn't look as right as about 10 other teams or 8 other teams or 11 or 12. It depends on your perspective. And the rest is these kids have to develop quickly. They have to find a way to impact, and specifically Julius Randle. It's rare for a rookie, even a good rookie, to come in and immediately become a high-impact player. It's rare for a rookie to come in and suddenly average 20 points and 10 rebounds and have an impact on a team that creates wins. That's a lot to ask of him. If the young players, and specifically Randle, could come in and be ahead of the curve, well, then suddenly you've got something more than what you have right now looking ahead. Randle may be something special. He just may not be that for 2 or 3 years. But if he can come in as a rookie and be that, compete possibly for Rookie of the Year, and be a guy who immediately impacts the Lakers, well, then again, there's something more than what they look right now.
Senior writer at BasketballInsiders.com, Eric Pincus. Get round-the-clock purple and gold news at his Laker Now blog at LATimes.com. Thank you again for joining me on RunTheTriangle.com, Eric.
I know, anytime. Thanks for having me.